Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new Redefining Security podcast. Have you ever thought that we are selling cybersecurity insincerely, buying it indiscriminately, and deploying it ineffectively? Perhaps we are. So let's look at how we can organize a successful InfoSec program that integrates people, process, technology, and culture to drive growth and protect business value. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Imperva is the cybersecurity leader whose mission is to protect data and all paths to it with a suite of integrated application and data security solutions. Learn more at imperva.com.
EdgeScan offers continuous vulnerability intelligence as a service, accurately identifying vulnerabilities and exposures across the full stack. All threats are verified by cybersecurity experts, providing exploitable risk and remediation guidance, virtually false positive free. Learn more at edgescan.com.
Hello, this is Sean Martin. You're very welcome to a new Redefining Cybersecurity podcast here on ITSP Magazine, where I hopefully do a decent job helping people understand the role of cybersecurity in business and how to operationalize technology and processes to make for a successful team and successful outcome for the programs, security, privacy, and otherwise. And of course, I don't know anything. I'm just the host here, and I always find amazing people to have incredible conversations with, and that's no different today. I have Deb Blyth and Merlin Namuth with me, who both have been on the show different times, I think, maybe together at one point. I can't remember, but it's great to have you both back.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Sean.
And today's topic, speaking cyber to the board more specifically. And it's a conversation inspired by Merlin. Happens to be a prolific writer and has many opinions and thoughts, sometimes has the opportunity, I should say, to share them. And he did so in a LinkedIn post, which caught my attention. And I was looking for an opportunity to chat with Merlin, and that popped up, and I said, let's do it. And Merlin was kind enough to bring Debbi to the conversation, who has a lot of experience in commercial and public sectors. And I'm excited for the insights from both of you. Quickly, a few words from each of you, your current role, previous roles, why this topic of speaking cyber to the board is important. Deb, I'll start with you.
Sure. So Debbie Blyth, I was the CISO for the state of Colorado for 7 years prior to joining CrowdStrike, and I am an executive strategist with CrowdStrike, and I talk with public sector, mainly executives, and help them with security strategy. Prior to working for the state for 7 years, I was CISO for 2 different multinational companies, and lots of experience talking to the board. And I think this is just a fantastic topic, because one of the things that I think about when thinking about talking to the board is the fact that we're often asking for funding. So it's super critical that CISOs know how to approach this conversation appropriately.
Nice. And Merlin.
Yeah, Merlin Namuth. I am currently CISO for a fintech company called Repay. This is my 5th security program I've run in my career, the second with the CISO title. My first security program that I built from scratch, I actually had the senior systems engineer title. So this was like way back in the day, and creating password policies and things like that from scratch. Yeah, I come from a really strong technical background. I've been an architect and engineer, incident responder, and I've been a leader for the last several years.
And I have to, before we get into the article, were you speaking to the board? Was there a board at that very first program that you built?
No, there was not a board then in the first one. But it is yet another skill that CISOs have to I guess possess, is to, be able to know how to speak to different audiences, whether it's to the board, to your peers, to individual contributors in your organization. And so what inspired me to write this post on LinkedIn was, I read a lot of articles about, here's how you're supposed to present to the board. This is the easy button. This is how you present to the board, and then the recipe for that. And what I'm finding is that I think a lot of those lack just some basic a basic concept that I learned in like English 101 in college of like, first you have to know your audience, because a lot of the language that I see or the advice that people give is that the board doesn't want you to dive into very deep into technical, or you just like avoid technical discussions altogether. And that isn't always the case. I've presented to boards that are very technical, and they want to know, like, to a pretty detailed level of what I'm doing in the security program. And I've also presented to boards that were mostly made up of CEOs, and they didn't want to dive into the technical stuff because that was beyond their understanding. They just wanted to, have high level visibility into the security program.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if not or just ruling out speaking technical might do a disservice to that conversation if they're expecting it, or perhaps even want to learn a bit more. So they may not know. And if I know we always talk about translating cyber to business and focus on the business, ignore the technical, kind of what you're saying there, Merlin.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's some middle ground probably to cross-translate and help each other understand each other's part of the business. And Debbie, your experience in that.
Yeah, when I worked for the company I did before I joined the state, I had many opportunities to present to the board. It was very helpful because when I joined the state of Colorado, I would say the equivalent to a board would be the various legislative committees that I had to present to. So whether it was the Joint Technology Committee of the legislature, or the Legislative Audit Committee, or the Joint Budget Committee, it was all a very formalized process. And what Merlin describes is accurate in that some of these individuals had technology in their background, and they were very curious. They, wanted to know some of the details and the nuts and bolts about my security program and the technology, versus others, were much less technically inclined and wanted to, have more of a high level view. And so sometimes I was literally peppered with questions, with a very deep dive technically. And sometimes it was very, very, very high level and almost, almost not even any interest, because they just sort of wanted the high level and the punchline, basically.
And I don't know who wants to respond to this, but so I was kind of poking at it a little bit with my first question to Merlin, if there was a board that he was presenting to in his first program. And I presume a lot of startups and most companies have boards these days. And if they're not talking to the board, if the security leadership team, with CISO or not, if you're a leader in security and there is a board, you're not talking to the board, let's start there. How important is it that you do? Or when is it important to, when is it not appropriate to engage with the board?
I'll go and start with that, and then Debbie add to that. So when I, my first security program, that was like in the late 90s, early 2000s. So that was before the really CISO was like I think the first CISO come along about that time frame, maybe a little bit earlier than that. I don't remember the exact year for that. So presenting to the board wasn't really viewed as something that you did for security, and then security was also like an IT function then too. So very different times than what they are today. I think it's extremely important to present to the board because one of the main functions of the board is to understand the risk of the organization. Whether it's financial risk, reputational risk, customer risk, and cyber risk. And so the board needs to be informed as to where the organization stands, because more and more of the boards are being held accountable for organizations in that manner.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And they are really making decisions to steer the company in the right directions. And if they're not factoring risk, including cyber risk, into that decision making, they're really missing an opportunity and they're missing something big that could hurt the business very badly. And so I agree. I think it's critical that the CISO is talking to the board and that security information is bubbling its way up and making it into the board presentations, because those decision makers that are, running the company or steering the company really need to be able to factor in that type of risk as well.
So how do you know? Obviously, you probably know the names of the board, whether or not you've met them or understand who they are in real life and what they care about is another thing. So how do you get that information? How do you know really who they are, what they care about, what they're going to be interested in? Kind of to your point, Merlin, knowing that audience so that you know how receptive there are to certain topics and how deep to go in others. So maybe Merlin, start with that.
Yeah, so I've recently been through that. I've been at Repay for a little over a year now, and the first time I presented to the board, I didn't know these board members, prior to coming here, and so I asked a lot of questions to my boss. I report to the CTO. I talk, CFO, chief legal, CEO. So I would get input from these various leaders who have presented that board, and just ask them, what is this board most interested in? What, what do they care about? And what are things I should talk about? Things that you advise I don't talk about. And so that really helped me be successful because, to Debbie's point, just talking about like how important the risk is, to the board, they need to have confidence in you as a CISO. And so first impressions do count, and they really matter. And so you really want to come out and make a good impression that first time you meet, because that's going to set the tone for subsequent meetings you have with them.
Yeah,
and when you have multiple boards in the form of committees where everyone's a little different and there's multiple people, and not that companies aren't political, but committees can be, right?
Yes.
Hyper political. So how do you get into the mix of that, Debbie?
Yeah. So one of the things I like to do is I like to look up each individual on LinkedIn and kind of find out what their background is so that I can connect a little better with them, and it can help inform my examples or my illustrations, and also maybe the depth of the information that I present. And I really, I agree with Merlin. It's good to know who are the individuals. Don't just look at it as the board, but go and figure out who those individuals are and what their areas of focus and interest might be. And that really will help you to connect better with those individuals. And I liked what Merlin said too, is find folks who have presented them to them before and find out what they drilled into and what they were interested into. I think that's super important.
I don't know if you can. Oh, go ahead, Merlin.
Yeah, I was just going to say is that after you present to the board, that maybe even after just one time, then you've established a relationship, and then you can like ask them, be like, hey, was this useful to you? What would you like to see more of and less of? Because most of the time, I mean, the board members want to help you be successful as well, and and part of that is making sure that that you provide the information that they need to be able to make their decisions. So
is it a balance of, because there's a bit of, we're the cybersecurity team, we know all this super cool magical stuff, right? We're going to abstract it for you because you're not smart enough to understand it. There's that whole angle, and then there's we have to be strong and have a solid posture for the role of CISO. But then there's these are some pretty powerful people, so I'm a little shy. How do you navigate some of that? Maybe Debbie, if you can comment.
Yeah, I think it's very important to be competent and confident, and to exude, hey, I know what I'm doing. I've done this before, but to also be humble and to be listening and to be interested in what they are concerned about. And then to, also to anticipate what their questions might be and to be prepared to answer those, to be prepared to respond to them, to be prepared to show them that what they care about, you care about. And so it's a little bit of both. It's, presenting yourself as being confident, but also being humble enough to really listen and be interested in what they're interested in as well.
Well, I think also too is to don't try to hide stuff, because of course there's a right way and a wrong way of presenting stuff. You don't want to like just be very abrupt with like, we really stink, in our security approach, posture, but to like give examples of like, here's opportunities that we're looking at to improve. And
Yeah.
here's where we're currently at today. And I've even said it's like it's not the position that's ideal for our company, but here's where I'm looking at going, and here's the roadmap to get there, and the time frame to get there. And so, to Debbie's point, that helps instill confidence in them that you are confident and you've done this before, you know how to get there.
And Debbie, I don't know how much you can share from your current role, working with a lot of people in many different industries with many different types of boards, and I don't know if you actually get into helping them prepare to present to their board with helping them strategize their program and whatnot. But I'm just wondering, because as we're talking here, I'm picturing an entity, almost like the board, a group of people as one.
Sure.
But then each one is individual.
Yep.
So how do you, so now you know who they are individually, how do you kind of strategize the engagement to ensure that you connect with all of them that you want to, in the right way, and not leave somebody out perhaps? So I don't know if you can share anything.
Sure.
There.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm working with individuals who are CISOs across the nation, typically in public sector. So they might be the CISO of a city or a county or a state. And so they may come to me with, this is the first time that I'm presenting to the governor or the city council or the joint budget committee, or, and what might you recommend? And so we definitely will go through, it's still critically important to know who your audience is, and whether it's the city council or it's the joint budget committee, there are a specific group of people who are on that committee. It's very important to figure out who are they as individuals, and what's their background, so that you can sort of tailor your presentation in a way that hopefully will make sense to them and that they will be able to connect to. So you put a little thought into that, and then you want to be able to have an agenda, have a leave behind. So, whether it's a PowerPoint presentation that's printed out, or it's a presentation that goes in their board book, whether it's a physical board book or it's a, electronic board book, something that you can leave behind. Find out how much time you have allocated. Show them the agenda up front so that they know, what we're getting to at the end, so that if we have to skip ahead, they kind of understand the flow. And then, definitely try to build in a lot of time to answer their questions, because the questions may be all over the board. This may be the first time that you've spoken with them, so they may have questions about, what is our risk posture and how do we measure it? Or they may have questions about, what are our other, city councils or cities or states or countries doing, or counties doing across the nation. So, your questions can be all over the board, but what you want to do is make sure that you build enough time to be able to recognize and answer individual questions, and just be able to, like Merlin said, kind of create those relationships.
Well, another thing that I can give an example, I guess an example within the last year. So when Log4j was announced, I mean, that was like all over the news, as we know.
Yeah.
I actually reached out to the board committee members, the committee that I report to, and said, hey, this is what's, I want to make sure you're aware of this, and here's what we're doing in response to that. Because not only is it giving them, again, building that confidence that, I'm on top of it and I'm aware of things that happen that way, but also, keep in mind that, a lot of times the board members are also members of boards of other companies as well. So
Yeah.
I want to make it useful to them to give them information that they can take into the other boards that then they might ask, probing questions that they need to be asking there that they may not have considered before.
That's really smart. So, I mean, what you're doing is building up their knowledge as individuals, giving them something useful to build them up as individuals. I think that's super smart.
Well, and it's it's possible that they might be a board of some company that has my personal information. So it's like I want that to be secure. So
Yeah,
it takes all of us, and then cybersecurity to be able to make things secure. So I just want to contribute back that way.
so true.
Yeah, it's all connected at some point, right?
Mhm.
It's all a big ecosystem. I want to stick with kind of the preparation point, because some of the points you just made, Merlin, I think, are once you've established, you've had that first engagement, you've established at least a connection and perhaps an ongoing relationship. For that first one, though, where it's, as you pointed out, Merlin, it's very important to set the stage, how you want it to go, right? So you want to control that narrative, but also being receptive to what they want to hear. So Debbie brought a few points in her previous message. I'm going to start with you, Merlin. What can a CISO do to prepare materials, mindsets? One question that's been in my mind as we're talking, do you fold into the theme of that board meeting? I don't know if there are themes for the board meeting, or we're talking budget, if we're talking whatever, or is it just, I have this message and I'm going to jam it in regardless of whatever else is going on? Because there may be other important things, and perhaps there's a way to piggyback on those other important things to be part of the bigger conversation. So how do our CISOs prepare for that first combo?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen that board committees or the board as a whole will have a charter, and it will define what topics need to be covered each quarter. And so it's important to understand what that is. Now, when you come into that first meeting, depending on when it's going to happen, I mean, even if you come in at the beginning of the quarter and then you present 3 months later, you're still not going to have a full understanding of the environment. And so you got really like do a lot of information gathering so you understand what the security posture is of the organization. And that's why I report on the first, be like, hey, here's my observations, here's what I'm diving in deeper with, here's an area that, yes, I think it's something that's really important we need to tackle, because with security, it's like, it doesn't matter what organization you're in. There's just some fundamental things that are true across every organization you need to have in place for security. One is like email security, because a lot of the significant number of the attacks come through phishing email. So is there something in place? If that's not in place, it's like I'm seeking out funding right away, to be able to get a solution in place, protect that. So those are some of the things I'm looking for. Do we have, is it antiquated antivirus, or do we have an EDR, an MDR, XDR solution in place? Just again, just really trying to just understand, where it's at, and to start putting together a roadmap. And I present in such a way, be like, here's my initial observations, based on the understanding I have. Next quarter I'll have more time in at the organization to be able to understand, do I need to expand upon that, or were my initial observations maybe a little bit off because things were better or worse than I initially thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it, Debbie.
So one of the things that sort of occurred to me is I like to use current events to reinforce my message. So, I could use Log4j to talk about why we need to invest in our development process, in building security into the development process, for example. Or I could use that, or SolarWinds to reinforce why I need to be investing in identity protection. And so I think it's really, it's a good idea. Don't sideline your whole message based on current events, but take some of those current events to sort of reinforce the message that you are wanting to bring forth to the board and what you need them to know as far as why you need their support for your program and the funding requests that you're potentially bringing to them. Use those current events to reinforce that.
And along with that is, the old adage of, don't come with problems, but come with solutions.
Yeah.
And so, like, the board, I mean, it's all over the news. The board is aware of ransomware, and
Yeah.
so they're probably gonna ask, what are we doing? Are we
Yes.
protecting against ransomware? And so I've presented to the board, be like, here's what we're doing for ransomware protection, as well as if we were hit by ransomware, here's what we're doing with our backups to make them, air gaps, so that way we could recover if we did have a problem.
Yeah, great point.
And so I was also thinking, as both of you were talking, so Debbie, I'm glad you pointed to the news, right? Things that we can latch onto that they probably heard about. How much of that combines with, especially if it's your first meeting, presumably you're in the role for a few months. If you're approaching the quarter, maybe if you only meet annually, you might have a nice 6 to 9 month runway ahead of you to understand what's going on. So how much of it is for this first engagement, my personal experience as a CISO, what I've seen, what I've done, mistakes I've made, things that I've accomplished, milestones I've achieved, combined with here are best practices, here are standards, here's what my peers are doing, combined with the current state of affairs within the organization. If you're early on, you may not know enough to really bring that in. So I presented 4 things. So state of the threat, state of the current program, your personal experience, and best practices and standards. Is there a mix of that you bring into that first? And are there other things that you bring into that first conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be okay to start the conversation with, this is who I am, and this is, a brief summary of my background. So I've been a CISO for 15 years. I've been in IT for 25 years. You really don't want to spend the bulk of your time talking about yourself. I think that sets the wrong tone. But I think, just giving them a high level overview to let them know that you are competent in your role. And if it makes sense, I mean, you may have already submitted a resume so that they know who you are. But definitely,
I'm going to pause you quick, Debbie, because
sure.
I'm curious. Do you share failures? I know some might say a CISO that's been involved in a breach might actually have better experience dealing with one or preparing for one in the future. So do you share failures? And if so, is there a line where that no longer becomes relevant?
You certainly could. When I was CISO of the state of Colorado, we had a ransomware event that took down an agency for a month. And so people love to hear about that. And what they really love to hear is, what did I learn and what did I do after? And so, when I can come in front of a board and say, having personally experienced a ransomware event, here are the 5 things that I look for, that I make sure that we are well prepared in these 5 areas. So yeah, I mean, I think that can come into, you having some relevant experience. I think it's also important to talk about having a framework. So, our team doesn't just chase after shiny objects. We have a framework that guides our security program, and then talk about how these current events relate to this breakdown in the framework. And so if we were following this, if that entity was following this framework, and had all of these things in place that, like Merlin said, are foundational security elements, they would have been in a much better position to either avoid it or respond better to it. And so I think those are really some important conversations that kind of give the board some confidence that you're the right person in the role, because you're not just chasing shiny objects. You actually have, sort of some maturity and methodology in how you approach this security problem.
And you're amazing for bringing us back on track, even though I derailed us with my interjection there. Merlin, I'd like your thoughts on the same thing. How do you view the components of what you're presenting?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to expand a little bit on what Debbie said of just the shiny objects, because I do share what my strategy is with the board, even if it's not on my immediate roadmap of like, hey, I want to like simplify things. So one of the things about my current role that makes it especially challenging is that Repay, as a publicly traded company, has acquired 8 companies in the last 3 to 4 years. So you know. Getting rid of tech debt and simplifying things and getting down to like one EDR solution, getting down to one logging solution, because when you acquire companies, you're acquiring their technology, which inevitably is going to be different than what you have. And so so I share with the board like, hey, here's what my strategy is, and here's a time frame I'm looking at with it. And so because especially in that instance, one of the reasons why companies acquire other companies is for cost savings and and to get efficiencies. And so in that instance, so like, yeah, security's cost of money, but I'm also like saving some money here because of consolidation of tools and processes. And so I'm just pretty open with the board that way. One time I was presenting to a board that was made up of mostly CEOs, and I actually cracked a joke, and people were and they laughed, and people were kind of like, "Wow, that's kind of bold, but that really worked. That you like, kind of lighten the mood there too." And it's like, I take my job seriously, but you also have to have a little bit of fun though too. And so I think it's good for the board to also kind of see you as a little bit as a person, and not just a CISO as well. Of like, here's an individual that cares about their job, but here's what they're doing to support the company culture. For example, if it's a culture that's more collaborative and people are really friendly with each other, then I think it's important for you to demonstrate that a little bit of that characteristic in the board meeting as well.
And I don't think we captured it on mic, on record. I think, Debbie, you mentioned the one of the main reasons for engaging with the board is often driven by money, getting budget and support for the program. But there may be other things that you engage with them for. So what is the outcome that you see is important? And it may be different for different folks. So maybe what are the outcomes for different people, for different situations? For this, we'll stick with this first meeting experience.
Sure. So a lot of times my interaction with the board was to go get money. So it was, I have specific projects I want to do. I need money to do them. I need the board to help support me in this. And so, I had to be prepared for, they would ask a gamut of questions. They would say, oh, good, it's the security person. Are we getting better or are we getting worse? And so I wanted to make sure that I had metrics or assessment results or something that I helped use to tell that story. They would say, well, what do you need from me? And I would be like, oh, that's a great question. And I would say, I'm coming to you today with an ask. And so I always tell people, make sure you have an ask, because they're probably going to say, what do you want from me? So make sure that you're ready for that. They may say, what are our competitors doing? And that's a hard question, because when you're in a private sector or public company, it's really hard to know what your competitors are doing. So I always say, you want to be participating in industry events and roundtables so that you can kind of listen for this type of information, look for surveys and other data points to help articulate that story. And just be very concise in what it is that what your ask is. So if it's a budget request, to have a very specific amount of money in place, and to be specific as to, is this a 1-year project, a 2-year project, a 3-year project, and have some specific outcomes. So that you can come back later and think about that too. The fact that you are going to come back later and you are going to present to the board what you did with that money that they gave you. So you better have an outcome in mind, and it better include how you're going to improve security and reduce risk. Not just that I had a project plan and I'm, 2/3 of the way through my project plan or whatever. And so those are just really, I think, super important things to keep in mind when you're preparing for that conversation with the board, and especially when you're, about to talk about money is, just be ready for those types of conversations.
Hmm. Well, another thing too that I just thought of that we haven't discussed yet is that I think it's really important to be aligned with your boss as well as the
Yeah.
other executives before going to the board meeting, because you don't want disagreement in front of the board. That's
Yeah.
that's just not a good place to be, because then the board's like, well, don't you guys talk? Aren't you guys working together? So talk about losing confidence very quickly. I
Yeah.
think the board would do that. Another point I was thinking of too, Debbie, is as you were talking, is with the metrics, and that goes into the appendix of my board presentation. I don't go through that. The board members read through the whole deck prior to the meeting, and if they have questions about anything in the appendix, they'll bring it up there. One of the things I always make sure I do is I show trending metrics, because they
Mm.
want to see, it's like, are we getting better? Are we getting worse
Yep.
in these areas?
Yep.
And
Very smart.
how important is it to connect those dots to revenue, where investments are being made to grow revenue, grow market share? Do you say, we know we're investing heavily in this new e-commerce platform and it's going to generate X, Y, and Z amount of money, and therefore our program is aligned to that with A, B, and C? Is that something you do there?
Yeah, that is a great question, because you cannot create your security strategy in a vacuum. And so it really is important to be very aligned with the business strategy. And that goes back to the point that Merlin made. You better be aligned with your peers. So you better know how the business is evolving, and you better be able to articulate how your program supports that, for sure.
Nice. Well, we're coming up to the end of time here. Not all time, just this time. And what I'm thinking I'd like to hear, I don't know, maybe you can pick one or the other or both, but any pitfalls to avoid, or things that you might not expect that you must be prepared for. You mentioned some questions and things like that you might
Yeah.
come, like things about competitors, but any pitfalls or any things you might expect that you wouldn't otherwise think of?
I would say, like, when you're putting together your slide deck, is to make sure that you're bringing out, you're pointing out things that you can speak to, you can articulate well. If it's something that you just have started investigating or don't have a lot of knowledge on yet, indicate that in the board deck that, hey, TBD, still investigating, still researching this, because if you don't, they're going to like hone in on that. And again, it's about appearing confident and sounding confident, and that's not only in how you present it, but also in your board materials as well.
Yeah, good points. And the other thing that I always tell folks, whether you're presenting to the board or to an executive group, a group of executives, is find out ahead of time how much time you have. Find out if there's a hard stop. So if they say you only get 15 minutes, for example, and then plan only about 8 minutes worth of content. So plan about half of that, because you may have a group of folks who are going to pepper you with questions, and you may not get all the way through your presentation. And so it's up to you. Keep track of your time. And skip to the end if you need to, or skip if you need to whatever you need to. And then if it turns out they're not chatty at all, have a few slides that are in your appendix that maybe you would love to cover more in depth if there's time, and feel free to just jump to those and cover those. But always, I would say, always plan less content. And so that you're building in plenty of time for questions, because with executives and with the board, they may ask you a gazillion questions and you may not get to everything you had hoped to present.
What happened? This just came to mind. What happened if within the first minute something you say as part of your presentation takes them back to the one they just finished because they triggered something else. Is there a way to bring them back to you easily?
You look for ways to kind of take control of that conversation. So, you can say something like, hey, love it that you guys are talking about legacy infrastructure. I'd love to bring this back to security and talk about how that legacy infrastructure is impacting our security strategy. So try to make a tie, even if it's a hard left-hand turn, try to grab the conversation and steer it in the direction that you want it to go in.
Well, exactly. Even if it reverts to like revenue, if their meeting they had before was about, company performance, they're like, well, revenue and you can tie in security that way, be like,
Yeah.
hey, we're trying to avoid a breach here that would become public that could impact revenue. And, that's why these investments are important and the projects that we're doing.
Good point.
All from experience, it sounds like. You have to live through these a few times. And I presume that while the players are different, it's still a meeting, right? It's still a group of people hopefully trying to accomplish the same thing and having a conversation and making decisions to move things along. So maybe not getting too head up about it. Just staying true to yourself and to what you know and know who you're talking to, as Merlin says, right?
Absolutely.
Love it. Well, Debbi and Merlin, thank you so much. I could talk more about this. Maybe we'll find a sliver of something else within this that we can keep talking about. But I want to thank you both for sharing your insights, and hopefully CISOs around the world pick up a few things. And as we said before we got into this, hopefully they think a bit more about how they approach their first and then subsequent board meetings. So thank you both.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And for those listening, I'll include the link to Merlin's LinkedIn post and any other resources that Debbi and Merlin want to share that they think might help with this conversation. And stay tuned for more Redefining Cybersecurity here on ITSP Magazine. Thanks, everybody.
EdgeScan offers continuous vulnerability intelligence as a service, accurately identifying vulnerabilities and exposures across the full stack. All threats are verified by cybersecurity experts, providing exploitable risk and remediation guidance, virtually false positive free. Learn more at edgescan.com.
Imperva is the cybersecurity leader whose mission is to protect data and all paths to it with a suite of integrated application and data security solutions. Learn more at imperva.com.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Redefining Security podcast. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.